Today, we're diving into a major clash of institutions, the U.S. Supreme Court going head-to-head with a former president over his signature trade policy. It's a story all about the limits of power, a really fiery political reaction, and, just a small matter of $175 billion hanging in the balance. And really, it all kind of boils down to this one single, pretty provocative statement made right after a huge legal defeat. So how on earth did we get here? Let's break down the court's decision. So here's the headline that kicked this whole thing off. The U.S. Supreme Court struck down a key part of former President Trump's trade strategy, what he called his global reciprocal tariffs. The court basically said, look, the way these tariffs were put in place, well, that was outside the president's legal authority. And what's really telling here is that this wasn't some squeaker of a decision. It was a decisive 6-3 ruling. And get this, 3 of the 6 justices who voted against him were actually nominated by his own party. That tells you this was a decision based on how they read the law, not just politics. Okay, so to really get what's going on here, we have to look at the law at the very center of this whole dispute. It all comes down to one piece of legislation, the IEPA. All right, so what is this IEPA thing? Well, it was passed way back in 1977. Think of it like an emergency toolkit for the president. It's designed to give them special powers to handle genuine national emergencies. We're talking war, huge economic threats, things that are truly unusual and extraordinary. It's not meant for everyday trade policy. And that right there, that's the exact point the Supreme Court zeroed in on. Their finding was crystal clear. A law meant for true national emergencies had been used to impose tariffs in what the court saw as normal circumstances. They called it an overreach of executive power. So the bottom line from the court's perspective is simple. You can't use an emergency law as a routine tool for trade. All right, so you've got this very judicial, very measured, constitutional ruling from the highest court in the land. But what happened next? Whoa, it was anything but measured. Let's get into the immediate and pretty volatile political fallout. In a press conference that was called, super last minute, Trump didn't just disagree with the ruling. He launched a direct personal attack on the justices themselves, calling them stooges of the radical left and even questioning their patriotism. And he didn't stop there. He said he was ashamed of the justices and called their decision a disgrace. For a current or even a former president to condemn the judiciary so directly, so publicly, it's really unusual in American politics, and it just shows you how intense his reaction was. And things moved fast. I mean, really fast. The court's decision drops on February 20th. By 12:45 p.m., just a little while later, Trump is already at a podium for this emergency briefing, and it's right there that he makes all those statements and also shuts down a question from a CNN reporter calling the network fake news. Okay, let's pause for a second, because this is a super important point to get right. Did this ruling just blow up all of Trump's tariffs? The short answer, no. So let's figure out what actually got canceled and what's still on the books. So here's the deal. The tariffs that got struck down were the ones imposed using that emergency IEEPA law we talked about. This covers those broad reciprocal tariffs, which were basically meant to match tariffs from other countries, and also some specific ones related to fentanyl. But, and this is the key thing, those big, well-known tariffs on steel and aluminum, they are still in place. Why? Because they were imposed using a totally different legal authority. So canceling these tariffs opens up a whole new can of worms. A really, really big one. A $175 billion can of worms, to be exact. What happens to all the money that was collected while these now illegal tariffs were actually being enforced? Yeah, just let that number sink in for a second. $175 billion. That is how much money the U.S. government took in from these specific tariffs. And now that the legal ground they stood on has been pulled out from under them, the question of where all that cash goes is completely up in the air. And this is the giant economic question hanging over everything. Is it possible that a future court order could force the United States to give that $175 billion back to the countries and companies who paid it? It's on the table. And if that happened, wow, that would be a massive financial U-turn. But for right now, it's just this huge unanswered question. So you might think after a big loss like this at the Supreme Court, you'd maybe take a step back, right? Nope, not at all. In that same fiery press conference, Trump was already rolling out his Plan B to get around the court's decision. And his game plan was pretty simple, really. Step 1, tell everyone the court's ruling is a disgrace. Step 2, announce a brand new plan for a blanket 10% tariff on every single country, which you have to assume would use a different legal justification this time around, this fight is clearly far from over. And that brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? This last quote just captures the whole tension perfectly. You have the sweeping claim of presidential power, I can embargo, I can do anything I want, right next to an admission of the specific limit the court just enforced. But I can't charge any money. It really leaves you with this fundamental question about the balance of power, a question that, you can bet, is not going away anytime soon.